I'm Ainsley Earhart.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Katie Pavlich, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, August 4th, 2021. I'm Jessica Rosenthal. If the pressure doesn't wear you down, maybe some more mandates and rules will, as government and business insist that you be vaccinated against COVID.
New York starts it now with the vaccination app, and many other cities, I think, will follow.
I'm Dave Anthony. The surge at the border keeps growing. Even more migrants came to the U.S. last month at levels we haven't seen in over 20 years.
We're in the middle of, what seems to be the climax of the surge right now. And the climax just keeps happening every month. The numbers just keep going higher and higher and higher. We keep thinking, well, when is this finally going to slow down? It's not slowing down.
And I'm Janice Dean. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Different places are handling a rise in COVID cases and available vaccines differently. Places like Los Angeles County are implementing indoor mask mandates again. New York City's the first to essentially implement a vaccine passport mandate, requiring people to show proof of at least one COVID shot, according to Mayor Bill DeBlasio.
The key to NYC Pass will be a first-in-the-nation approach. It will require vaccination for workers and customers in indoor dining, in indoor fitness facilities, indoor entertainment facilities. This is going to be a requirement.
Now, places in Florida, where many of the new cases and hospitalizations are occurring, aren't allowed to implement new mask mandates or vaccine passport requirements, according to Governor Ron DeSantis.
We're not shutting down. We're going to have schools open. We're protecting every Floridian's job in this state. We're protecting people's small businesses. These interventions have failed time and time again throughout this pandemic, not just in the United States, but abroad. They have not stopped the spread.
White House officials say they support local governments and business moves to require vaccines or masks. President Biden encouraged people who are unvaccinated to get the shot Tuesday, while criticizing states that ban mask or vaccine mandates.
And the most extreme of those measures is like the one in Texas that say state universities or community colleges could be fined if it allows a teacher to ask her unvaccinated students to wear a mask. What are we doing?
But he warned as long as the virus continues to rage outside the U.S., potentially more dangerous variants could arrive at our shores again, saying it's crucial to continue providing vaccines to other countries. Still, the CDC says vaccine rates are increasing here in the U.S., particularly in states which have so far had lower numbers of people getting the vaccine.
I was talking to my doctors here at Fox every day about it.
Bill Hemmer is co-host of America's Newsroom on Fox.
And since I had been coming into the Fox headquarters in New York every day since it started, I did not feel invincible, Jessica, but I felt as if, wow, heck, if I'm going to get it, I would have had it by now. And I did not have the antibodies, and I don't get a flu shot. And I was talking with Dr. Mark Siegel, who's written books about this stuff for 15 years, and he seemed to be the one person I knew the best about pandemics and trusted the most because we put him on TV every day. And he said, right, Bill, this is the safest vaccine humankind has ever made. And he said, it's not new. We've been working on it for 30 years. It's just now new to this. And he said, you're going to be fine. And that's what led me to come around, I would say, in March of last year. And then I got vaccinated in April. And that's what led me. The other thing, Jess, I was thinking if I want to leave the country for anything, whether it's pleasure or for work, I knew I'd have to show proof of a vaccination. And that has been the case already.
Yeah. Are you surprised that vaccine mandates are proliferating the way they are especially after the kind of year we had, right, with the anger and resistance over masks and lockdowns, to now know that businesses and government agencies are saying you need to be vaccinated or else? It's not just the airlines, right? Did you see? It sounds like you did see that.
I could sense it a few weeks ago for sure. And I don't know where it stops, by the way. Because if you're following the news, every day it brings more headlines about more demands upon those that, the officials who want you as an American citizen to get the shot. And my guess is after what New York is announcing, that will continue to expand across the country. New York starts it now with the vaccination app. And many other cities, I think, will follow. I think, Jessica, the reason why they're doing that, we can argue whether it's right, wrong, good or bad, but I think in France, they started this about a month ago, same in Italy as well. And the French government is reporting that millions of people in France signed up for the vaccination once they required them to do this. So there's a little bit of a push and pull on behalf of the public officials to get more people vaccinated.
Let's shift, because there's so much other news, right? Inflation. There's this raging debate right now. Is it transitory? Is it not? Transitory being, post-pandemic related, and we just need some time to get through this. Either way, there are some economic minds out there who are worried this is not transitory, and others who say even if this situation could provide sort of like a price reset at a higher level that could be with us for years to come.
Years to come.
Inflation seems so nebulous, right, until it shows up in your grocery bill.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your sense as you cover this?
Yeah, Jessica, I'm a little older than you, so I remember the 1970s, then I remember the 1980s, and inflation is no bueno for America. It's no good for the economy. And it's a difficult thing to get out of once it starts going in that direction. I think we're headed higher. I don't know how much higher. I listen to voices on the right. I listen to them on the left. And a lot of them think, well, some of them think it's benign. Others think, look out for this, because it won't be just in 2021 when you'll feel it, but you'll feel it well into 2022. My fear, however, is that if Congress is considering $4.5 trillion in additional spending, that the inflation fears and feeling we're having right now will only increase. And I think that is something in all likelihood you can take to the bank.
Let's talk about, you live in New York. Let's talk about Governor Andrew Cuomo. New report found that he did sexually harass several women, current and former state employees. This is a civil report, though one of the investigators said, now that these facts are contained in this report, it is up to local police and prosecutors to do what they will, obviously within statute of limitations, of course. Governor Cuomo has since responded, saying that the facts are different than what is in this report and that he never touched anyone inappropriately. There's an impeachment investigation going on at the assembly level in New York state government, and several lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, have called for him to resign. What's going to happen here? I
think he's got two options. He either steps down or he fights it. And we'll find out very soon what he decides to do. There's a third option. The Speaker of the Assembly, the Speaker of the House, can conduct impeachment proceedings. I don't know which of those three will take place here. However, I remember with great clarity the accusations that were leveled against President Bill Clinton in the 1990s from Monica Lewinsky. And when Bill Clinton appeared in, I believe it was the Roosevelt Room of the White House. There's a painting behind him in that video that you can see that will tell you if I'm right or wrong. Maybe it was the Yellow Room. I can't remember exactly. And he came out and he said, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky. And off we went into a deep rabbit hole that eventually led to impeachment in the House and an acquittal in the U.S. Senate. And that story was with us for several years, and I don't know if anyone knew what Bill Clinton would say or do at that moment when he approached the microphone. And I think at least at the moment in this current holding pattern we find ourselves, Jessica, I think the question is open for debate, too, as to what Governor Cuomo does next.
Let's do some foreign policy here just for a minute. Let's talk about China. As we leave Afghanistan, the Chinese are meeting with the Taliban. The Chinese are investing heavily in Latin America. Before his trip to Southeast Asia last week, our defense secretary said he was most focused on activity in the South China Sea. China is dominating the headlines. What are you paying attention to as an anchor reporter when it comes to China?
I think what's happening in Hong Kong is just reprehensible. And I think as a democratic institution, the United States government needs to do more and say more. Doing something is difficult.
Yeah.
But saying something and making sure that you have a voice in the decisions they're making for Jimmy Lai and the Apple Publishing Company, These are big moves. And, President Xi, I think, is very interesting. Maybe your audience knows this, maybe they don't. But what I learned about President Xi is that his father was in the Communist Party. And something happened during the 1960s, and he was climbing within the party, and he got knocked down. He made a mistake or something happened, and he spent the rest of his life trying to work his way back into the good graces of the party. And Xi watched that, and that is very fresh in his mind. And I think when he went out and made his speech 3 weeks ago and was dressed in the same uniform as Mao, standing above his portrait in the Forbidden City, I think that was quite a statement about how he felt about the strength and the future for the Communist Party in China. One other point, Jessica. In about 5 days in Tokyo, Japan, they're going to conclude the Summer Games in Tokyo. Right. And they're going to have a handoff ceremony to representatives from Beijing, China. And they're going to pass the torch. And they're going to be in masks. And the pandemic will still be raging in certain parts of the world. It will be under control in certain parts of the world. But in 6 months, Beijing expects to open the Winter Games in China. Right. And how will the world body respond when that happens? Will they still be wearing masks in China then, knowing that the Communist Party locked us out entirely from getting any information or any sense of a righteous investigation in Wuhan? That hasn't happened. They're not going to let us do that. But yet, will the world still coalesce around China in Beijing come February of 2022? My expectation is yes. And let's see how this debate plays out over the next half year.
Wow. My only other question for you is I looked up the other day and I saw young Clint Eastwood on my screen, and it was an ad for a Fox Nation special on the actor-director, and you're hosting it. What did you learn about Clint Eastwood that might surprise you?
I've seen a ton of his films. I think one of my favorite actually is in recent times that he directed and acted in called Gran Torino. I thought it was an excellent play on like the sociology of America and American neighborhoods. I think it was filmed outside of Detroit, Michigan. Real good film. Clint Eastwood is 91 now. And what I didn't know about him, and our producers have done a terrific job of pulling together all these old clips about his life and his acting career, his directing career. Did you know, Jessica, his films have grossed more than $5 billion. He's had a career that's extended more than 60 years. He's been in everything with everyone and has been amazing with his staying power. But when he started, he had a way of acting that he did not want to interrupt. And some of these directors came to him and they talked to him about being, this is a quote now, a hayseed, thin, rural, and very laconic, that he spoke too slowly and had an overpronounced Adam's apple. But Eastwood never broke character. He was like, well, just take the camera tighter, because I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm going to stay in this character. And you got some of the great lines of all time. And then later when he went on to direct a lot of films, and this is a line from the documentary on Fox Nation, it said he efficiently made films with small budgets that almost always make money. He doesn't shoot very many takes. He doesn't drift from the script, and he always wraps production on time. That tells me he's an efficient businessman. And then the social commentary that he weaved into the films later, not just Dirty Harry 4 decades ago, but the films that he directed and starred in later in life, really a social commentary for how he feels about America and certain issues. Check it out.
We will. Bill Hemmer, thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Great questions, Jessica.
This is Janice Dean with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
More immigrants are coming to America illegally. In the biggest surge in more than 20 years, the AP reports another 210,000 were apprehended at the border last month. That's more than 10% more than June, when Vice President Harris said,
"We're not exactly where we want to be yet, but we have seen extreme progress over these last few months."
She has urged people not to come here while trying to address the root causes of this migration in their home countries. Now, of those immigrants taken into custody in July, more than 19,000 were children traveling alone, an all-time high.
There is no end in sight right now.
That is Art Del Cueto. He is vice president of the National Border Patrol Council, a union of border agents.
I don't care if you're on the right side or the left side of the aisle. We all deserve to be safe in our homes, there should be no difference when it comes to our nation's borders. And right now, it's beyond chaotic. It's horrific.
Many of the migrants are crossing over in Texas.
The epicenter is here in the Rio Grande Valley where we are, and border agents out here are just completely overwhelmed.
Bill Melugin is a Fox News national correspondent covering the situation at the border in La Jolla.
Over the weekend, they apprehended more than 8,000 people, more than 3,000 in one 24-hour period. And as of this weekend, DHS sources were telling us Border Patrol stations here in the McAllen area were nearly 600% over capacity. So it's not slowing down at all. It's only getting worse, and these numbers are shooting up like a rocket.
Yeah, that's a big number, but these are just the ones that Border Patrol stops. Or does Border Patrol get most of them? What happens when these migrants do get into Texas when they finally cross over?
So that's a good point that, yes, these apprehension numbers, these are only the ones that we know about. We'll never know about the gotaways. And it's impossible to count all of those because we don't know how many slip through the border when border agents aren't able to get to them. And what's happening is the cartels and the smugglers are very smart. What they do is they send over large, huge family unit groups across the border. And they know that Border Patrol resources are going to get sucked up having to process those family units. It takes hours sometimes. And what they'll do is when those family units are being processed elsewhere along the border, they will send the runners, the criminals, the cartel guys, the drug runners, the people who do not want to be caught. And we've caught that actually happening on our drone before. So there's just no way of knowing how many runners actually get through because border agents are also telling us that their manpower is running really low right now. They've got so many agents who have been pulled off the line having to do processing, paperwork, social worker sorts of things that they have fewer and fewer agents actually out patrolling the front lines, and that's leaving sections of the border open and exposed.
When people who are Americans think of apprehension or being stopped or being arrested, there's a lot of fear in that. But when the immigrants come into Texas, into the La Jolla area, is that what you see? They're not fearful, are they? I mean, some of these people are happy that they've been stopped, correct?
Yeah, so a lot of the family units of migrants that we see out here, they are wanting to be apprehended by Border Patrol. They'll come up to us and say, "Donde está la migra?" Where's Border Patrol? Actively seeking out agents because they know their family units, if they claim asylum or they claim fear, they've got a good chance of staying. They'll basically be processed and taken down to downtown McAllen, likely released to the Catholic Charity, where they'll be given a bus ticket or a plane ticket to go wherever they want with a court date in the future. So that's why a lot of these folks are you'll see in our videos sometimes, they're smiling or giving us thumbs up or dancing. They are looking to be apprehended, at least those family units. The opposite side of the coin are the runners who do not want to be caught because sometimes they are criminals, smugglers, that sort of a thing, or they've been deported before and they don't want to be deported again.
Now, you mentioned the Catholic Charity. There has been a story about a couple of hotels where they've put some of these migrants who've been testing positive for COVID. Now, when do these migrants get tested? Does Border Patrol do that?
They don't do it at the initial point of contact. So when Border Patrol encounters the migrants out in the field, they are not tested there. When they're tested is when they're potentially handed off to HHS or when they're handed off to the Catholic Charities. Before they go into the charity's custody, they will sometimes be tested at a site in downtown McAllen through a third party. Now, yes, those stories about the hotels are true. What happened is these migrants were COVID positive. Border Patrol released them to the custody of that Catholic Charity, and then the Catholic Charity quietly started placing them in hotels here in the McAllen area. And there are two that we know of so far, one in La Jolla, one in Weslaco. The one in La Jolla blew up because some of those infected migrants left the room and went into a Whataburger and had no masks on and were coughing all over the place, and some of the patrons complained. Police did an investigation and later found out that the charity had put them in there. And the charity has not told any of these cities that they're putting these migrants in there. So I actually reached out to the executive director of the charity and I asked her, how many COVID positive migrants have you guys placed in hotels here in the Rio Grande Valley? And she told me that she has been advised not to comment.
Advised by who?
Exactly, that's the question.
When some of these migrants are put on buses, obviously it's crowded on the bus. Have they been tested before that?
Nope, they're being placed on the bus having absolutely no idea how much COVID is on the bus. They're all given little surgical masks and then they're crammed together. And that's why there's been outbreaks. That's why agents are getting sick, migrants are getting sick. The first 2 weeks of July, migrant cases here in the Rio Grande Valley surged over 900%. the numbers are just shooting up like a rocket as the Delta variant is spreading.
Texas has a Republican-led government trying to deal with the surge on its own.
Americans all over this country ought to be damn angry what's happening to their country. Total invasion. And people in every state are going to die through a combination of people coming in illegally with COVID, with the fentanyl drugs that are setting an all-time record.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Now, Texas is working to restart border wall construction, and Governor Greg Abbott has ordered state troopers to arrest immigrants for trespassing.
So that just got underway. At last check, it started when I was in Del Rio 2 weeks ago, and I think they've only, at last check, had like a dozen or so migrants arrested on trespassing charges, and they get taken to a jail. I believe it's called Dilley, Texas. It's kind of like an hour north of Del Rio. But yes, what they're doing is Abbott is he's putting up this chain link fence near the Rio Grande with barbed wire on the top and no trespassing signs. So the idea is if anybody climbs that fence, crosses it, that sort of a thing, they can be arrested on state crimes rather than federal crimes. So instead of calling Border Patrol and saying, hey, we've got some migrants here, you guys need to pick them up, Texas state troopers can just arrest them themselves and charge them under Texas laws and put them in Texas jails. And that process is just getting started.
President Biden has said he's undoing damage his predecessor did, implementing a more humane border policy. But something from the Trump era remains in place. Title 42, a CDC order aimed at protecting public health. It was extended Monday to prevent COVID's spread. Title 42 allows Customs and Border officials to expel immigrants who come here illegally, not let them in. Back to Bill Melugin. Is that happening?
In some cases, yes, but it's typically only happening immediately with single adult males from the Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. If there are families coming across and they are claiming fear or asylum, they are not being Title 42. They are being allowed to stay.
Okay, so the crowds that we see, those are families coming here?
Almost all of them, yes, are massive family units, yes.
There was drone video you have been showing on the channel of a big crowd of migrants. Where was that?
That is in Mission, Texas, under Anzalduas Bridge. Anzalduas Bridge is about a mile away from a very popular crossing spot at the Rio Grande. So the migrants just illegally cross, they walk into the U.S., and then there's actually a bunch of trails with signs pointing them where to go, and they pop out right into that area. And when the surge is really bad, it is absolutely packed under there. But what that video that you're talking about, it is the worst we have ever seen it. Maybe before there's 100 or so people, there's well over 1,000 there. And it just goes to show we are in the middle of, what seems to be the climax of the surge right now. And the climax just keeps happening every month. The numbers just keep going higher and higher and higher. We keep thinking, well, when is this finally going to slow down? It's not slowing down, and it hasn't.
Now, you mentioned asylum. These migrants know that they have to say that they are fearing for their lives or their families in the country where they're from in order to at least get an asylum hearing. The hearings themselves, what's the process for that?
So it kind of depends. All of that is very backlogged right now. So what will happen is, say a family unit comes across and they say they fear for their lives in whatever country they're coming from. They will be given what's known as an NTA, a notice to appear, and a court date in, who knows, 6 months, a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, depending on how backlogged it is, and they will be released into the country. And they'll fly, get bussed whenever they want, and then they will either show up for that hearing in the future or they won't. A lot of them don't show up. And in some cases, Axios just had a report a few days ago that about 50,000 migrants have been released into the country with no court date and absolutely no way of tracking them. They were just flat out released, and there's no way of knowing where they went. And only 13% of them ever show up to the local ICE offices to register.
Okay. Now, under President Trump, they would have had to wait in Mexico, correct?
Correct. And that's been I talk to a lot of these migrants when they come across, and they tell us that was one of the biggest deterrents was the remain in Mexico policy before. They didn't want to have to wait in Mexico while their case was being heard. Now that they can come into the United States and move around here while their case is being heard, that's a lot more enticing for them. The surge kind of times up with right when President Biden took over in February is when you started seeing those numbers just shooting up. And based off the migrants we've talked to, Remain in Mexico was a big part of the reason why.
Have you been able to talk to any Border Patrol agents, say off the record, or who didn't want to be quoted but were telling you anything?
Yeah, I mean, we talk to them all the time, and obviously not on the record, but the morale has never been lower. They've never been more frustrated. They feel like they've been turned into social workers. They're not actually being able to do their law enforcement job and physically patrol the line of the border. They're basically being turned into administrative guys doing paperwork all day because these family units don't stop coming across, because they know now's the time for them to claim asylum, because they will have a higher chance of being able to stay in the United States under President Biden than they would under President Trump.
Now, the Biden administration has said it's seasonal, a lot of this surge this year.
Yeah, that's just not true, and it's blatantly not true. And a lot of the statements the administration has made throughout this crisis, whether it's Mayorkas saying the border is closed, Kamala Harris saying that there is extreme progress being made, or President Biden saying in a CNN town hall that there's been a 90% reduction in the amount of migrants in Border Patrol custody. The first two statements are just completely false. And Biden's statement, yeah, if there's a big decrease in the amount of people in Border Patrol custody, it's because they're all being let go. And we got video of it yesterday. I mean, we were in downtown McAllen as Border Patrol was just dropping off busload after busload after busload of migrants at the Catholic Charity. They were then walked over to the bus station, and they were out of town, and they're just moving elsewhere into the United States.
Bill Melugin, Fox News national correspondent, who's been our eyes and ears right in the border for the last several months and now in La Jolla, Texas. Bill, good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Subscribe and listen to the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Former federal prosecutor and four-term U.S. Congressman from South Carolina brings you a one-of-a-kind podcast. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. Rate and review the Fox News Rundown on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
It's time for your Fox News commentary. Janice Dean. What's on your mind?
I've always said it doesn't matter what ultimately brings Governor Andrew Cuomo down. And if it's Tuesday's sexual misconduct accusations that lead to his exit from politics, then that's okay with me. I've gotten to know a few of the women that have accused the governor of misconduct, and we all want the same thing, for Cuomo to finally leave office. Tuesday's damning report from the Attorney General Letitia James concluded that the governor, the same one who was being hailed as a presidential candidate last summer, sexually harassed multiple women and in doing so violated federal and New York state law. Listening to these women's stories of being terrified, demeaned, and being taken advantage of made me so angry. And not just because of the situations they were forced into, but because Cuomo almost got away with it. This is just one of the many investigations into the governor's conduct and behavior. Cuomo's power-hungry reign over New York extended into a pandemic, with the governor celebrating himself instead of actually helping the people he represents. Sending COVID-positive patients into nursing homes for 46 days helped kill thousands of elderly, including my husband's parents. But if you watched the news last spring, you probably would never have known. He was riding high on his popularity by winning an Emmy Award, creating and selling creepy posters of a conquered COVID mountain, and pitching a $5.1 million book. All the while, he covered up how his decisions led to seniors dying by the thousands. There were also friends and family COVID tests for his brother, CNN anchor Chris Cuomo, and others while nursing homes weren't allowed to use them. He even used taxpayer resources to drive them to and from the lab in upstate New York. Cuomo has always played the victim from the very beginning and blamed everyone else for his no-good, terrible, deadly mistakes. Tuesday was no exception. After Attorney General James issued her scathing report, he had a taped response saying he's always been this way, just ask his friends and family. He even played a photo montage of him kissing all sorts of people, young, old, and many, many politicians. In fact, his 83-page response included 8 pages of him hugging politicians. This proves nothing except that Cuomo is grasping at anything to take the blame off him and his behavior. I think we're all sick and tired of this governor making excuses and blaming the victims. I would challenge the governor to try to make it all about him in front of grieving families someday. It's now time for our other leaders on both sides of the aisle to demand his resignation. But one thing I've learned the past year and a half covering Albany lawmakers is how spineless they are when it comes to holding the executive chamber accountable. They've had enough time to impeach him for months now, but have been stonewalling and waiting for someone else to do it for them, perhaps. If it's not the Attorney General telling them he's broken the law, who will? Now is the time to do the right thing, because Lord knows the governor won't. Janice Dean, Fox News.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa. Just say,
Alexa, play news from Fox.
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it. On demand from Fox News and Amazon Alexa.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.